Officer Danvers saw her before the sun came up, a shadow moving where no one should be near the fenced-off construction site, his cruiser tires rolling slow over the gravel road. He already knew how this would go. Another person looking for shelter, another warning to give, another few minutes of his shift spent dealing with someone who did not belong there. He had done this dance many times before. Young people with backpacks, old men with shopping carts, sometimes couples huddled together trying to find a dry spot away from the wind. He knew the routine: get out of the car, shine the flashlight, ask them to move along, write a report if needed, call for transport if they seemed unwell. But something about this figure made him pause. She was not crouched down or hiding. She stood tall and still, one hand resting on the chain link fence, as if she owned the place, as if she had every right to be there. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, a soft gray bleeding into pale blue. The streetlights still glowed, casting long shadows across the empty lot beyond the fence. Steel beams rose into the air, skeletal and silent, the skeleton of what would become expensive apartments with balconies and underground parking. Right now it was just dirt and machinery, bulldozers parked in neat rows, cement mixers waiting for the workday to begin. The air smelled of damp earth and diesel fuel, a cold morning, the kind that made you pull your coat tighter around your shoulders. Danvers sat in his car for a moment longer, watching her. She did not move, she did not seem nervous, she just stood there looking up at the half-built structure as if remembering something important. He pushed open the car door, the sound loud in the quiet morning. His boots hit the gravel and crunched with each step he took toward her. He kept his hands visible, not reaching for anything, not threatening, just walking slowly, giving her time to see him coming. Most people ran when they saw an officer, especially at this hour, especially in a place like this, but she did not run. She turned her head slightly as he approached, her face coming into view in the dim light. She was older than he expected, not elderly but not young either, maybe 60, maybe 70. Her hair was silver and pulled back neatly. She wore a thick coat buttoned all the way up despite the mild weather, a scarf wrapped around her neck. She looked clean put together, not like someone who had been sleeping rough, not like the usual people he found in places like this. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and calm, "this is private property, you need to step away from the fence." She turned fully now to face him, her eyes meeting his, without fear, without anger, just a deep quiet sadness that surprised him. He had seen many emotions in his years on the force: fear, anger, defiance, confusion, but this was different. This was the look of someone carrying a heavy weight, someone who had come here for a reason that had nothing to do with shelter or theft or trouble. "I know," she said, her voice soft but clear, "I know it is private property." "Then why are you here?" he asked, keeping his tone even. He did not reach for his notebook or his radio, he just stood there a few feet away, giving her space. She looked past him toward the construction site, then back at him. "I used to live here," she said simply. Danvers almost smiled, not a real smile, but the kind you give when someone says something that cannot possibly be true. "This land has been empty for years," he said. "Before that it was warehouses, nothing but concrete and loading docks for decades." She shook her head slowly, not arguing, just correcting. "No, before the warehouses there was a house, a white house with a wide porch and a swing that creaked when you pushed off hard enough. There were lilac bushes by the front steps, they bloomed every spring. The whole yard smelled like flowers. For a week my mother would cut them and put them in jars all over the house." Danvers knew the history of this part of town. He liked old maps. He spent his free time sometimes looking through city records at the library. He knew this block. There had not been houses here since the 1950s. The whole neighborhood had been cleared to make room for the highway expansion. Families moved out, buildings torn down, the streets themselves erased from existence. Sycamore Lane, Elm Street, Oak Avenue, all gone, replaced by asphalt and guardrails. "Ma'am," he said gently, "there has not been a house on this land since before I was born, the city records show." "I know," she said again, and that word carried so much in it, not disagreement, not confusion, just acceptance of a truth that hurt. She knew the records, she knew the history, she knew the house was gone. She had not come here thinking she could walk inside and find her old bedroom. She had come here for something else, something he could not yet understand. "Why are you here then?" he asked. The question came out softer than he intended. He found himself curious, not suspicious, not official, just human. She looked toward the fence again, her eyes tracing the lines of the steel beams against the brightening sky. "I had to come back," she said, "one last time before they pour the foundation for the next building. They start Monday. I read about it in the paper." Danvers felt something shift inside him. This was not a trespassing case, this was not someone causing trouble, this was a person saying goodbye. He thought of his own childhood home sold after his parents passed. He had driven past it once. Years later a new family lived there, new paint, new cars in the driveway. He had just driven by, he had not stopped, he had not gotten out. He wondered now if he should have. "You took the bus here," he said, noticing she had no car, no bag, no signs of having traveled far on foot. "The night bus," she said. "It comes this way at 3:15 in the morning. I got off 6 blocks back. I walked the rest. I did not want anyone to see me. I did not want anyone to ask questions. Some things you have to do alone." He nodded. He understood that more than he could say. His father had passed 2 years ago, a quiet man who did not like fuss. The funeral had been small, just family and a few old friends. After everyone left, Danvers had driven to the lake where he and his father used to fish when he was a boy. He sat in his car for an hour just looking at the water. No one knew he was there, no one needed to know. Some goodbyes are private things. The radio on his shoulder crackled to life. A dispatcher calling his unit number, reporting a suspicious person at the construction site on Miller Avenue. He looked at the woman standing before him, calm and still, and knew he would not call this in as a problem. He keyed the microphone. "Unit 7, he said. "All clear." "False alarm, just someone checking on the property." A simple lie, not a big one, not the kind that would cost him his job, but a choice he made in that moment to protect a moment of peace, to allow a goodbye to happen without interruption. The dispatcher acknowledged his message and signed off. Danvers turned back to her. The sky was lighter now, a pale gold spreading across the horizon. Birds began to call from a tree down the street, the world waking up around them. She still had not moved from her spot by the fence, one hand still resting on the cold metal links. "Would you like some coffee?" he asked. The question surprised him. He did not usually offer things to people he stopped in the night. He did not usually stay this long. He had 20 minutes left on his shift. He should be heading back to the station, filling out paperwork, getting ready to go home to his empty apartment, but he found he did not want to leave, not yet. She looked at him, then really looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time, not just an officer in a uniform but a person, a man with tired eyes and a kind voice. She nodded once, just a small movement, but it meant yes. "Wait here," he said. He walked back to his cruiser, the gravel crunching under his boots. He opened the passenger side door and reached for the thermos he kept there, always filled before his shift started. His wife had given it to him years ago, before she left, before the divorce, before the long quiet nights alone. He poured 2 cups. The coffee was bitter and too hot, but it was warm, and that was what mattered right now. He also took the breakfast sandwich he had not eaten, wrapped in foil, from the gas station. He walked back to her, holding out 1 cup and the sandwich. She took them both, her fingers brushing his for a second, cold from the morning air. He gestured to the curb a few feet away where the sidewalk began before the fence line. "Let's sit," he said. They walked together slowly, her steps careful, his measured to match hers. They sat side by side on the concrete edge of the world, the construction site before them, the waking city behind them. Steam rose from the coffee cups in the cool air. She unwrapped the sandwich slowly, carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you," she said, and the words held more than gratitude. They held surprise, as if kindness from a stranger was something she had almost forgotten existed. Danvers sipped his coffee and watched the light change minute by minute, the steel beams catching the first direct rays of sun, glowing orange for a moment before settling into dull gray again. He did not ask her name, he did not ask for identification, he did not treat her like a case or a problem. He just sat with her in the quiet morning, 2 people sharing a moment neither of them expected to have. And as the sun rose higher, he realized he had been wrong when he first saw her. He had thought he knew how this would go, but some moments change you without asking permission. Some encounters stay with you long after the shift ends, long after the sun comes up, long after everyone else has forgotten. He sat there with her and waited to see what would happen next. Officer Danvers sat beside her on the curb, the coffee warming their hands as the sun climbed higher above the city skyline. She ate the sandwich slowly, taking small careful bites. He watched the construction site come alive in the morning light, shadows shrinking, machines beginning to hum in the distance, but neither of them moved. They just sat there, 2 strangers sharing a quiet moment before the world demanded their attention again. After a while she spoke, her voice soft but steady. I was 7 years old when we moved into that house. My father carried me over the threshold even though I was too big for it. I remember laughing. He said it was for good luck. Danvers listened. He did not interrupt. He did not check his watch. He just let her talk. The house had green shutters, she continued, and a big oak tree in the backyard, the kind of tree that seemed to hold the whole sky in its branches. My brother and I built a fort in that tree. We used old blankets and nails we found in the garage. It wasn't much, but to us it was a castle. She paused, looking toward the bulldozer parked near the center of the lot. That is where the tree stood, she said. Exactly there. The roots went so deep they had to bring in a special machine to pull them out. I read about it in the newspaper years later when they started clearing the land. Danvers felt a strange ache in his chest. He thought about the places he had loved as a child, the creek behind his grandparents' house where he caught tadpoles, the corner store where the owner always gave him an extra piece of candy, the baseball field where he learned to throw a curveball, all gone now, paved over or abandoned or changed beyond recognition. "Why did you wait so long to come back?" he asked. She wrapped her hands around the paper cup as if drawing warmth from it. "My husband wanted to bring me last year when they first put up the fence. He said we should go together, take pictures, make a day of it, but I couldn't do it with him there. This wasn't something to share, this was something to carry alone." Danvers understood that too. Some hurts are too personal to show another person. Some memories belong only to you, like a secret you keep even from those who love you most. "My mother planted those lilacs the year I was born," she said. "As long as they bloomed I would always have a piece of home with me. Even if I moved across the country, even if the house burned down, the lilacs would remember me." She looked at Danvers, then really looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. "I know you think I'm strange, an old woman standing at a fence before dawn talking about flowers that haven't grown here in 60 years. He shook his head. "No ma'am, I don't think you're strange. But you wonder why it matters," she said. "Why a patch of dirt behind a chain link fence means anything at all." Officer Danvers sat beside her on the curb, the coffee warming their hands as the sun climbed higher above the city skyline. She ate the sandwich slowly, taking small careful bites. He watched the construction site come alive in the morning light, shadows shrinking, machines beginning to hum in the distance, but neither of them moved. They just sat there, two strangers sharing a quiet moment before the world demanded their attention again. After a while she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I was 7 years old when we moved into that house. My father carried me over the threshold even though I was too big for it. I remember laughing. He said it was for good luck." Danvers listened. He did not interrupt. He did not check his watch. He just let her talk. "The house had green shutters," she continued, "and a big oak tree in the backyard, the kind of tree that seemed to hold the whole sky in its branches. My brother and I built a fort in that tree. We used old blankets and nails we found in the garage. It wasn't much, but to us it was a castle." She paused, looking toward the bulldozer parked near the center of the lot. "That is where the tree stood," she said. "Exactly there. The roots went so deep they had to bring in a special machine to pull them out. I read about it in the newspaper years later when they started clearing the land." Danvers felt a strange ache in his chest. He thought about the places he had loved as a child, the creek behind his grandparents' house where he caught tadpoles, the corner store where the owner always gave him an extra piece of candy, the baseball field where he learned to throw a curveball, all gone now, paved over or abandoned or changed beyond recognition. "Why did you wait so long to come back?" he asked. She wrapped her hands around the paper cup as if drawing warmth from it. "My husband wanted to bring me last year when they first put up the fence. He said we should go together, take pictures, make a day of it, but I couldn't do it with him there. This wasn't something to share, this was something to carry alone." Danvers understood that too. Some hurts are too personal to show another person. Some memories belong only to you, like a secret you keep even from those who love you most. "My mother planted those lilacs the year I was born," she said. "As long as they bloomed I would always have a piece of home with me. Even if I moved across the country, even if the house burned down, the lilacs would remember me." She looked at Danvers, then really looked at him, her eyes clear and steady. "I know you think I'm strange, an old woman standing at a fence before dawn talking about flowers that haven't grown here in 60 years. He shook his head. "No ma'am, I don't think you're strange. But you wonder why it matters," she said. "Why a patch of dirt behind a chain link fence means anything at all." He did wonder, but he also sensed this was not really about dirt or fences or even lilacs. It was about something deeper, something he could almost touch but not quite name. She continued before he could answer. When my father died, he asked to be buried with a sprig of lilac in his pocket. My mother did it. No one else knew, just her and me and the funeral director. A small thing, but it mattered. It was their thing, their secret. Danvers thought about his own father, a quiet man who fixed things with his hands, who taught him how to change a tire and tie a tie and look someone in the eye when you shake their hand. His father had not wanted a funeral, just a simple cremation, scatter the ashes in the river he loved to fish in, but Danvers had not done it yet. The urn sat on a shelf in his closet, waiting for the right day, the right moment. He kept telling himself, next month, next season, when the weather is better, but the truth was, he was afraid that once he let go there would be nothing left. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the city wake up, car engines starting in driveways, a dog barking somewhere distant, the low rumble of a garbage truck making its rounds, the world moving forward, while they stayed still, anchored to a moment that existed only in memory. Then she said something that surprised him. I used to be a teacher, third grade, for 42 years. I taught children how to read, how to share, how to be kind. I had a rule in my classroom: no one eats lunch alone. If I saw a child sitting by themselves, I would sit with them just for a few minutes, just until someone else joined us. Danvers smiled, a real smile this time. He could picture her in a classroom, bright posters on the walls, small chairs, small desks, a woman with kind eyes and steady hands guiding small humans through their days. Did you like it? He asked. I loved it, she said. Every single day, even the hard days, even the days I came home tired and frustrated. I never once wished I had chosen a different path. He thought about his own job, the long nights, the paperwork, the people who cursed at him or lied to him or looked at him with fear in their eyes. He had chosen this work because he wanted to help, but sometimes he wondered if he was really helping or just moving problems around like pieces on a board. You ever have a student you couldn't forget? He asked. Always, she said. A boy named Leo. His family moved around a lot. Sometimes they lived in shelters, sometimes in cars. He was smart, so smart, but he was always hungry. I started keeping granola bars in my desk drawer just for him. One day he gave me a drawing he made of us sitting at my desk reading a book together. He wrote at the bottom, "My teacher is my friend." I still have that drawing in a box at home. Danvers felt something loosen in his chest, the way it does when you hear a truth that matches your own experience. He thought about the people he had helped over the years, not the big arrests or the commendations, but the small moments. The woman he drove to the hospital when her car broke down, the teenager he talked down from a bridge one rainy night, the old man he helped find his way home when dementia stole the streets from him. These were the moments that stayed with him, not the paperwork, not the promotions. The sun was fully up now, painting everything in gold. Light workers began arriving at the construction site, trucks rolling through the main gate, hard hats appearing like mushrooms after rain. Danvers knew he should go soon. His shift had ended 20 minutes ago. His replacement would be wondering where he was, but he could not bring himself to stand up, not yet. A man in a reflective vest and dusty boots walked toward them. He looked to be in his late 50s with a weathered face and calm eyes. He nodded at Danvers first, then at the woman. "Morning, officer," he said, then to her. "You the one been standing here since dark?" She nodded yes. He did not look angry or suspicious, just thoughtful. He glanced at the spot where she had been standing, then back at her. "You hear about the old house?" She looked surprised. "How did you know?" He pointed to the ground near the fence line. "When we were clearing the back section last month, we found something, a stone step worn smooth in the middle from years of footsteps. We also found bits of china, a blue pattern with little flowers. We bagged it all like we always do, but I kept thinking about the people who used those things, who walked on that step, who ate off those plates." Danvers felt a shift in the air. Something important was happening here, something beyond a simple trespassing call. The foreman, whose name tag read Ray, knelt down and brushed away some loose dirt with his gloved hand. "Right about here," he said. "This was your front walk, wasn't it?" She stood up slowly, Danvers rising with her. She walked to the fence and pointed to a spot just inside the gate. "Yes, right there. The lilacs grew on either side of the step. You had to be careful not to brush against them when they were in bloom, or you'd get pollen on your clothes." Ray nodded, like this made perfect sense to him, which somehow made it feel more real to Danvers. We saved that step, he said, didn't throw it in the rubble like we usually do, something about it felt important, I don't know why, I just knew we should keep it. Where is it? Danvers asked. In my truck bed covered with a tarp. I been meaning to take it to the Historical Society but I keep putting it off like I was waiting for something. The woman looked at Ray, then at Danvers, her eyes glistening but not with tears, with something else, recognition maybe, or peace. May I see it? She asked. Ray nodded and walked toward a red pickup parked near the site office. He returned a few minutes later with 2 other workers helping him. They carried the stone carefully, like it was fragile, like it was holy. They set it down on the grass just outside the fence line. The granite was gray with age, a deep groove worn into the center where countless footsteps had passed over it year after year, generation after generation. The woman knelt beside it, her old knees protesting, but she did not seem to notice. She ran her fingers over the smooth worn path, then over the rough edges where it had been broken from its foundation. This is it, she whispered, this is the step. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small cloth bundle. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing dried purple flowers, brittle and fragile but still holding their shape, lilacs pressed between sheets of wax paper saved from a bush she had grown in her own yard years ago from a cutting her mother had given her. She scattered the dried blossoms over the stone. They settled into the groove like they belonged there, like they had been waiting all this time to come home. Danvers watched her and felt something change inside him. He had come here expecting trouble, expecting to enforce a rule to move someone along, but instead he had witnessed something sacred, a return, a remembrance, a quiet act of love stretching across decades. Ray stood quietly nearby, his hard hat in his hands. He did not speak, he just watched and nodded once as if giving permission for this moment to exist. The woman stood up slowly, brushing dirt from her coat. She looked at Danvers, her face calm, her shoulders straighter than they had been before. Thank you, she said to him, to Ray, to the stone, to the memory itself. Thank you. Danvers knew then what he had to do. He would not write a ticket, he would not file a report about trespassing. He would file a report, but it would be different. It would be about preservation, about memory, about the human need to honor what came before us. But first he would drive her home. He would make sure she got there safely. He would bear witness to the end of this journey, because some moments demand more than procedure, they demand presence. And as he helped her toward his cruiser, he understood that this was why he had become an officer, not to control people, not to punish them, but to protect what matters, even when what matters is just a memory, even when what matters is a stone step and a handful of dried flowers and the love that connects them across time. Danvers opened the passenger door of his cruiser for her. She settled into the seat with a soft sigh, buckling the seat belt herself, her movements slow but sure. He walked around to the driver's side, sliding behind the wheel, the car still warm from his long shift. He did not start the engine right away. He just sat there for a moment, looking at the construction site, now alive with workers and machines, the granite step still resting on the grass where they had left it, covered now with a blue tarp Ray had placed over it to protect it from the dust and morning dew. Where to? He asked. She gave him an address on the east side of town, a part of the city he knew well, quiet streets lined with mature trees, small houses with carefully tended gardens, the kind of neighborhood that felt like it had existed forever, unchanged by time. He started the car, the engine humming to life, and pulled away from the curb, the tires crunching over gravel one last time before hitting smooth pavement. She looked out the window as they drove, not speaking, just watching the city unfold around them, buildings growing taller, then shorter, then taller again as they moved through different parts of town, the sun now high enough to cast sharp shadows across the streets. You have been kind, she said after several minutes, her voice barely above a whisper. Most people would not have stopped, most would have written a ticket and sent me on my way. Danvers kept his eyes on the road, his hands loose on the wheel. I have been doing this job a long time, he said. You learn to see the difference between someone causing trouble and someone carrying something heavy. She nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. My father was a watchmaker, she said, out of nowhere, the words floating between them like smoke. He had a small shop downtown with a red awning and a bell that rang every time the door opened. He could fix any timepiece, no matter how old or broken. People would bring him pocket watches their grandfathers carried in the war, clocks that had stopped ticking decades ago. He would spend hours bent over his workbench with tiny tools and magnifying glasses. His hands never shook, not once in all the years I watched him. Danvers listened, the rhythm of her voice soothing like a story told at bedtime. He taught me that everything has a rhythm, she continued, even broken things, even silent things, they still hold the memory of their purpose. A stopped clock still knows what time it is supposed to show, it just needs someone to listen to it again to help it remember. They passed a park where children were playing on swings, their laughter carrying through open windows. When the city decided to tear down his shop for a parking garage, she went on. He did not protest, he did not write letters or join committees. He simply packed his tools, his magnifying glasses, his tiny drawers of gears and springs, and closed the door for the last time. But every Sunday for the next 5 years he would walk to that parking lot, stand in the exact spot where his workbench had been, and just stand there for 10 minutes. Then he would turn and walk home. He never explained why he did it. And I never asked, I just knew it was his way of saying goodbye in pieces instead of all at once. Danvers felt those words settle deep inside him. He thought about his own father, the urn still sitting on his closet shelf, waiting for the right moment, the right day. He had been waiting for a sign, something to tell him it was time to let go. But maybe the sign was not something you waited for, maybe the sign was the waiting itself. My mother used to say, she continued, that places hold memories like cups hold water. When the house is gone, the memories spill out, but they do not disappear. They soak into the ground, they rise up in the grass, they live in the air above that spot forever. Anyone who stands there can feel them if they are quiet enough to listen. They drove in silence for a while, passing shops and bus stops and people beginning their days, a woman walking a dog, an old man feeding pigeons in a square, a teenager on a bicycle weaving through traffic, all these lives unfolding around them, each person carrying their own memories, their own lost places, their own silent goodbyes. "How long have you lived at your current address?" he asked. 34 years, she said. "My husband and I bought the house when we were young. We raised our children there. We grew old there. The lilac bush by our back door came from a cutting of the original bush from the house that stood where the construction site is now. My mother gave me that cutting the day we moved in. She said, as long as it blooms you will always have a piece of home with you." Danvers thought about his own apartment, small and tidy but empty in a way that had nothing to do with square footage. He had not cooked a real meal in weeks, eating takeout from containers at his kitchen table, watching television just to fill the silence. He had not invited anyone over in months, not because he did not like people, but because the emptiness of the place felt like a reflection of something inside him he could not name. "Do you still have the lilac bush?" he asked. "It died last winter," she said. "The winter was too harsh, too many cold nights in a row, but before it went it bloomed one last time, a burst of purple so bright it seemed to fight against the gray sky. I cut every flower I could reach, pressed them between pages of an old book. I knew I would need them someday, I just did not know when." She looked at him, then her eyes clear and steady. "You are carrying something too, officer." The question was not really a question, it was a statement, gentle but certain. Danvers did not answer right away. He drove through a green light, his hands tightening slightly on the wheel. He had not spoken about his father to anyone, not really, not about the silence that filled the apartment after the funeral, not about the way he still sometimes picked up his phone to call him before remembering he could not about the guilt that lived in his chest like a stone, the guilt of relief that the suffering was over, mixed with the guilt of being relieved at all. "My father passed 2 years ago," he said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth, like words spoken in a language he had almost forgotten. "I have not scattered his ashes yet. They sit in a wooden box on a shelf in my closet. I keep telling myself I will do it when the weather is better, when I have more time, when I am ready, but I am starting to think I will never be ready." She did not offer empty comfort. She did not say it will get easier or he is in a better place. She simply nodded as if she understood the weight of what he had shared. "Readiness is not something you find," she said, "it is something you choose. You stand at the edge of the water, afraid of the cold, but the only way to know the temperature is to step in. You cannot prepare for it, you can only do it." They turned onto a tree-lined street, houses with porches and flower boxes appearing on either side, children's bicycles leaning against fences, garden hoses coiled neatly by spigots. This was a place where people lived, not just existed, where lives were built and maintained with care. "My stop is the third house on the left," she said, "the one with the blue door." Danvers slowed the cruiser, pulling to the curb in front of a modest house with a well-kept yard, a bird bath in the center of the lawn, a welcome mat at the door. The blue paint on the door was fresh, bright against the white siding. Before she opened the door, she turned to him, her hands resting in her lap. "You will scatter his ashes," she said, "not a question but a promise. You will do it soon, not because you are ready but because you choose to be, and when you do you will not feel relief right away. You will feel the weight of it, the finality of it, but then slowly, like the first light of dawn, you will feel something else too. You will feel him in the wind on your face, in the water below you, in the space between heartbeats. That is where our people go, not to some faraway place but into the world itself, into the things that mattered to them." She opened the car door, stepping out onto the sidewalk. She turned back to him once more. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, "not as a problem, not as a trespasser, but as a person who needed to say goodbye." Danvers nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. She walked up the path to her blue door, moving slowly but with purpose, a woman who had completed something important, who had honored a memory, and in doing so had freed a small piece of herself. He watched until she disappeared inside the house, the door closing softly behind her. Then he sat in his cruiser for a long time, the engine still running, the morning sun warming the dashboard. He thought about the granite step covered by a blue tarp. He thought about dried lilacs resting in a groove worn smooth by generations of footsteps. He thought about a watchmaker standing in a parking lot, remembering the rhythm of his life. And he thought about his father, a man who loved rivers, who taught him to skip stones, who laughed with his whole body when he found something funny. Danvers reached for his radio, keying the microphone. "Unit 7 to dispatch," he said, voice steady. "I am 10-7 out of service for 30 minutes, personal errand." Dispatch acknowledged his message with a simple copy that. He put the car in drive, pulling away from the blue door house, turning not toward the station, not toward his apartment, but toward the highway that would take him to the river where his father had loved to fish, where the water ran clear and cold and endless. He did not know if he would scatter the ashes today or tomorrow or next week, but for the first time in 2 years he knew he would do it soon, not when he was ready, but because it was time to choose readiness, to step into the cold water and trust that on the other side of the gesture was not an ending but a different kind of presence. The road stretched ahead of him, straight and open, the sun on his face, the city falling away behind him. He drove toward the river, toward memory, toward love, toward the quiet truth that some goodbyes are not endings at all but transformations, a changing of form, not a disappearance. And as the trees grew thicker along the roadside and the sound of traffic faded, replaced by birdsong and wind, he felt something shift inside him, something small but real, like the first turn of a gear in a long silent clock beginning again to keep time. Danvers drove with the windows down, the morning air cool against his face, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant rain. The river was 20 miles from the city, a place his father had loved for its quiet, its steady flow, its refusal to hurry. He had not been back since the funeral, the thought of it too heavy to carry alone, but today the weight felt different, not lighter exactly, but changed, as if he had found a better way to hold it. The road narrowed, winding through hills covered in oak and pine, sunlight filtering through the branches in shifting patterns across the windshield. He thought about the woman with the lilacs, her calm certainty, her hands resting on the granite step as if greeting an old friend. He thought about Ray, the foreman who had saved that step without knowing why, who had covered it with a tarp as if protecting something sacred. "Sometimes," he said aloud to the empty car, "sometimes we do the right thing before we understand why we did it." The words hung in the air between heartbeats. He reached the river, pull-out gravel crunching under his tires, the same spot where he and his father had parked 1,000 times to fish, to talk, to sit in comfortable silence. The water moved steadily, brown and clear over smooth stones, the current making a sound like breathing. Danvers turned off the engine. He sat for a long time just watching. Then he got out, walking to the trunk of his cruiser. The wooden box felt heavier than it should, a simple thing carved by his father's own hands years ago during a winter when snow kept him indoors. "My final project," he had joked, "if I ever need it, which of course I want." Danvers carried the box to the water's edge, his boots sinking slightly in the damp sand. He knelt the way the woman had knelt before the granite step, his knees protesting the cold, the damp, the weight of the moment. He did not speak, no words came to him, no prayer, no farewell, just the river and the sky and the box in his hands. He opened it. The ashes were finer than he expected, like grey sand, like dust from an ancient road. He cupped a handful, feeling their lightness, their impossibility. This was all that remained of a man who had filled rooms with his laughter, who had taught his son to ride a bike, who had held his wife's hand through 40 years of marriage, who had fixed leaky faucets and told bad jokes and worried quietly about money and the future and his children's happiness. Danvers let the ashes fall. They caught the wind, scattering across the water, some sinking immediately, some floating like tiny boats riding the current away from him into the deeper parts of the river where the water moved faster, where the light could not reach. He watched until the last visible trace disappeared. Then he sat back on his heels and waited for the feeling to come, the relief, the closure, the sense of completion he had been promised by well-meaning friends who said scattering ashes would bring peace. But nothing came. Just the river moving, the sun warming his shoulders, the distant call of a hawk circling overhead. He felt the same. The guilt rose then, hot and sharp. I should have done this sooner, I should have honored him faster, I should have been stronger. But as he sat there, something shifted, not in the world around him but in how he saw it. The river had not changed because his father's ashes touched it, the water did not flow differently, the stones did not rearrange themselves, yet something had happened, something real. His father was not in the box anymore. That was the truth, simple and profound. The man had never been in the box to begin with. The box held only what was left behind, the essence, the presence, the love that had filled a lifetime, that could not be contained in wood or ash or memory alone, that lived now in the way Danvers tied his shoes, the way he paused before speaking, the way he noticed when someone was hurting and chose kindness over procedure. The river knew this, the river had always known this. It carried everything, eventually, not by destroying but by transforming, by taking what was given and making it part of the whole. Danvers stood brushing sand from his knees. He looked at the empty box in his hands, then back at the river. "Thank you," he whispered, the words barely audible even to himself. He did not know if he was thanking his father or the river or the woman with the lilacs or the simple act of showing up when it mattered most. Maybe he was thanking all of it, the whole chain of moments that had led him here, to this bank, to this breath, to this understanding that love does not end, it changes form like water, becoming vapor, becoming rain, becoming river again. Back in the car, he did not drive immediately. He sat with his hands on the wheel, feeling the sun warm the steering wheel beneath his palms. He felt tired, but not the tired of long shifts and paperwork. This was a deeper tired, the tired of carrying something heavy for too long and finally setting it down. His radio crackled, dispatch calling his unit number. He keyed the microphone. "Unit 7 here. Officer, we have a situation at the Miller Avenue construction site. The foreman raised something about preserving materials. He refused to let the crew pour foundation until you arrived. He said you would understand." Danvers felt a slow smile touch his lips. "Copy that, dispatch," he said. "I'm en route." He turned the car around, heading back toward the city, toward the steel beams and chain link fences, toward the place where memory met progress. When he arrived, the site was quiet, workers standing in small groups talking in low voices. Ray stood near the granite step, still covered by the blue tarp, his arms crossed, his face set in determination. The developer showed up, Danvers learned from one of the workers, a man in a crisp shirt and expensive shoes who had arrived an hour earlier, demanding to know why work had stopped on a $3 million project. Ray had stood his ground. "This step stays," he had said, "until the officer who was here this morning returns. He will understand." The developer had scoffed, threatened lawsuits, threatened to fire everyone, threatened to call the mayor, but Ray had not moved. He had simply stood between the construction crew and the spot where the foundation was to be poured, his body a quiet barrier against erasure. Danvers walked toward them, his uniform still clean, his posture straighter than it had been 24 hours ago. The developer turned as Danvers approached, his face tight with impatience. "Officer, thank goodness, maybe you can explain to this man that we have deadlines, we have investors, we cannot stop progress for a piece of rock." Danvers looked at Ray, then at the developer, then at the granite step, its edges visible beneath the tarp. "With respect, sir," Danvers said, his voice calm but firm, "that piece of rock is not in your way, it is your foundation." The developer blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" Danvers gestured to the step, then to the half-built structure rising behind them. "You are building homes here, not just structures. People will live in these apartments, they will raise children, celebrate birthdays, fall in love, grow old, they will create memories within these walls, but memories need roots, they need to know they are built on something that mattered before them." He paused, letting the words settle. "That step belonged to a house where a child lost her first tooth, where a father taught his daughter to ride a bike, where lilacs bloomed every spring for 60 years. That history does not compete with your progress, it completes it." The developer opened his mouth to argue, but something in Danvers' stance, in his eyes, stopped him. Ray spoke quietly. "We could set it into the lobby floor," he said, "not hidden, not making a big display, just there, visible when people walk in, a reminder that this place was loved before it was built." Danvers nodded. The developer looked from Danvers to Ray to the covered step, then back to Danvers. He sighed, not in defeat but in consideration. "How much would it cost?" he asked. Ray shrugged. "A few $100 extra for the masons, maybe less. It would actually strengthen that section of the floor." The developer was silent for a long moment, watching workers shift nervously nearby, the city moving around them, cars passing on the street beyond the fence, life continuing as it always does. "Fine," he said finally, "but it has to be subtle, no plaque, no fanfare, just the stone." Ray nodded once, a small tight movement that held the weight of victory. Danvers felt something warm spread through his chest, not pride, not satisfaction, but connection, the understanding that small acts of preservation matter, that one person choosing to save a stone step could ripple outward, touching a foreman, a developer, an officer, a woman with dried lilacs in her pocket. He walked to his cruiser, but before leaving he turned back to Ray. "Where is she?" Danvers asked. "The woman who was here this morning." Ray shook his head. "I don't know her name, but she left something for you." He walked to his truck, returning with a small paper bag folded closed. Danvers took it carefully. Inside was a single dried lilac blossom and a note written in careful script. "For the officer who saw me." Danvers closed his hand around the flower, its fragile petals pressing into his palm. He drove back to the station, not to file paperwork, not to end his shift, but to write a letter, one that would take time and care, words chosen not for procedure but for meaning. He would write to the Historical Society about Sycamore Lane, he would write to the City Planning Department about preserving memory in new developments. He would write not as a demand but as an invitation to see what he had seen, that some places hold more than dirt and stone, they hold the shape of lives lived with love. And as he parked his cruiser in the station lot, the sun warm on his shoulders, the dried lilac safe in his pocket, he knew he would visit the completed building someday. When the apartments were filled with life, he would walk into the lobby, find the granite step set into the floor and stand on it for a moment, just a moment, feeling the groove worn smooth by generations of footsteps, feeling the weight of all those comings and goings, all those hellos and goodbyes. And he would understand that we are all just passing through, leaving our marks, however small, however temporary, trusting that someone after us might pause, notice and choose to remember. The world moved forward, but it did not have to forget. And sometimes the most powerful thing an officer could do was not to enforce a boundary but to protect a memory, to stand between progress and erasure and say softly but firmly, "This matters, this stays." Danvers stepped out of his car, the station door waiting ahead of him, his shift long over but his work just beginning.